All right, everyone. Well, thank you again for joining another episode of Breakfast with Gene and his road to the Western States. Today, we've got the great fortune of having Gene and Ellie Greenwood joining us today. You all know Gene from the past episodes and his big goal to be the oldest finisher of the 2023 Western States 100-mile endurance run. And who better than to give him tips than the famous or infamous Ellie Greenwood of North Shore, Vancouver, who shattered the standing women's record in 2012. And I've known Ellie for a very, very long time. Used to run behind her in our ultra training days back in Banff. And she since graduated to Vancouver. So thanks for joining us, Ellie. Appreciate you making time today.
No, it's always a delight to talk about Western States, and I'm super excited for you, Gene. I think it's an awesome goal that you've got coming up, and I was super pleased when I saw that you'd got the Stoked Oats spot. So, yeah.
Okay. Ellie, what do you think about running at 74, 75? You gonna get ready for another record?
So me doing it,
oh,
there's
yeah.
absolutely no way. No, I'd like to think I'm not that old, okay? But the older I get, I have more and more respect for folks like Gene, or even folks in their late 50s or 60s, right? That are still able to not only get out and physically do it, but also really want to do it. That's what I think is the most intriguing. But you obviously love your running, Gene. And yeah, I'd love to be in that position in 30 years' time. I think it's unlikely.
Well, you give me too much credit, because it's not that I can still do it. It's that I didn't start until I was older. So
yeah,
that makes it easier to keep going at this age.
True. Yeah, probably lots of new experiences, which is fun. So.
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting process learning about Gene's his drive and the fire inside him that just keeps him going. I mean, I kind of share your position, Ellie. It's there were a number of hard years, a lot of difficult races, and long training blocks, and it's mentally tough to continually gear yourself up year after year when, I mean, let's be honest, you especially have accomplished so much. Western States, comrades. I mean, you hit the biggies that you were after. Western States twice, including the record. It's what's left to prove, right?
Yeah, but I also think, I mean, certainly my driving force when I mean, I'm now a bag of aches and pains, which is why I won't be like you, Gene, because even at a younger age, I would say I'm really not able to do these things. But I think you've got to do it for the love of it, right? If you're doing it purely for, there of course can be at any ability level, a level of competition or wanting to challenge yourself or prove yourself, right? But if ultimately, I think if you just love the community, the places you get to go, like that kind of stuff, that's personally what I think keeps people in the sport. And maybe some of the people that drift out are the people that are a bit more, hey, it's bucket list, or they're just out to do a challenge, and once it's done, they're like, well, I've challenged myself and check mark, right? Whereas I'm sure Gene's extremely involved, and it's like you get to go and hang out with a group of great people for, well, however long you're running, and get to see some amazing scenery along the way. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited, and I think that I've got a lot more ultras left in my game.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was super. I'm sure you were following along, Gene, to was it Jack? It was Jackpot 100-miler, where there was 4 men in the 80+ division, which is, I mean, that's just cool, right? That it's like, having other people out there and saying, yep, I'm sure that's going to be you, and in what, 6 or so years. So.
Awesome. Well, why don't we jump into a little Q&A with Ellie? We'll get to know you a little bit more. What got you into the awesome world of ultra running in particular? And I'll just start it with that question. How the heck did you end up in ultra running, and what fueled you in those highly competitive years of yours?
Yeah, so I guess I mean, somewhat traditional, right? I always ran a little growing up, but not very much, and certainly not competitively. I then had sort of had this, always liked the idea of a marathon. Like, everybody hears of marathons, and I guess some people would go, "That's crazy," and I'm like, "I don't know, it looks kind of fun, right?" So yeah, so I did marathons in my early 20s, and then then I heard about this thing of, oh, there are races that are longer than marathons. So yeah, I got into some like low-key 50Ks, and then, as I'm sure with a lot of people, well, one, I did it, and I did it purely for fun, and I had good fun, right? And then for me, it was a way, like, I'd done hiking before, and I'd got into trail running, so it was like, road running. So it was like a combination of like, well, if you like hiking and you like running, then let's throw the two together and go
Right.
trail run. And yeah, just got exposed. Living in North Vancouver, we've got a ton of like fun ultras around there. So yeah, I got to know people, and then it was like, okay, are you going to do this race or that race? And so pretty organically, right, in my mid to late 20s. So yeah.
Awesome. And what drove you once you got into it? It was just truly the enjoyment, or where did the competitive spark? Because I remember when we used to run together back when you were living in Banff, the competitive drive wasn't with, the other people on the start line per se, or setting records. It was something deeper inside of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a bit of the sense of, but at the time, okay, I was decent but not exceptional marathoner, and so it's like, oh, that was fun and it's good and I wanted to improve, right? But then I started to do trail ultras, and it's like, oh, I seem to be like relatively better than this, which of course is partly the fact that it's like way smaller fields, right? So
Sure.
I think there are very few people who'd win a race and just say like, oh, well, I have zero care about that, right? Yeah, and then I got some like low-key sponsorships, and that felt like a level of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess it just, I mean, of course it's fun to win or do well, right? And then I was sort of, you go, well, could I do even better at the next race, or is there a longer distance to challenge myself for, right? So yeah, I think it was just about doing my best, and because I loved running, I was prepared to put the miles in training. Like, that was like enjoyable. So although some people, I want to do my best, but I got quite I don't want to say single-minded about running, but I was very focused on it, right? So I enjoyed putting in the hours of training, because that's what I like to do. And then by default, you got good results. And yeah, once you've got a few good results, you just, I don't know, want to have a few more. So, yeah.
I do remember you telling me about the Banff Center, thinking it was odd that you would book out the treadmill for 3 hours at a time.
Oh, you're still not meant to tell them that.
Right.
So I used to go to the, when I lived in Banff, there was only one place to go on treadmills. And of course, it is quite wintry in Banff. So I would run outside all year round. But in theory, there was a 30-minute limit on the treadmills. But only one person ever complained about me once. And the front desk looked at the security camera, and they're like, oh, it's her. No, we're not going to chuck her off the treadmill. So they knew I was training for stuff, and they were pretty accommodating. And yeah, it was, again, I don't mind saying I don't mind a treadmill run once in a while. So yeah.
Yeah. So Jean, some of that ring true to you, the enjoyment, the group, and then how success builds on itself in terms of your journey from your mid 50s to present?
Well, we have an interesting overlap here, in that I've done 79 ultras, and Ellie has done a few less. Obviously, she's more into quality than quantity. But out of all of those, there are only 2 races that we have in common. And one of them was 2012 Comrades. And
really?
that was the race that made me into an ultra runner. I had done 150K 3 years before that, and at the finish line, loudly proclaimed, "Screw this." no desire to do another one. And then 3 years later, somebody said, who wants to run Comrades with me? And believe it or not, it dredged up a memory from back in 1950s. When I was just a grade schooler, I remembered hearing about this race in South Africa. And I hadn't thought about it in the intervening 60 years or so. But as soon as I heard the name, I said, yes, I'm going to do that race. And it was training for Comrades that I found out that ultras were a whole lot of fun. So that 2012 Comrades, it was big for Ellie and it was big for me for a different reason.
Yeah, no, that's very cool too, because I often say to people, like, I mean, I love Western States, I love Comrades, I think, as you know, entirely different types of races. Mm-hmm. But I often say to people, if you're a road marathoner and you're only ever going to do one ultra, do Comrades. If you're a trail runner and you're only going to do one road race, do Comrades, right? So I'm like, there's no excuses. You can't say, oh, I don't do ultras or I only run trails. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's quite a special event. And that's really cool that, yeah, it got you the bug for a lot more ultras. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a
so
overlap,
I don't
guys.
think. And as for continuing on a competitive basis, well, there really are very few opportunities for old people to compete in ultras. Most of these 100 and 200 milers, they don't even have age group awards, you know. So clearly, I'm doing ultras for the fun of it, and it's great fun. I've told people I'd give up if I had to choose between road running and ultra running. I'd give up the roads for sure. I know that. And in fact, that might be how life is playing out. I have an illness that keeps me from running fast. So I might be giving up roads and doing all ultras from now on. Who knows?
Next year, Gene will have a big ultra beard. He'll have made the full transition. That'll be great. Okay, well, let's get into some specifics about Western States then. Ellie, so 2 times at Western States, right?
Yes.
2 victories, 1 course record, shattered Anne's record, which had stood since 1994. So what's that?
Yep.
Yeah, very impressive. You beat it by what, 50 minutes or so? And I remember watching this race. They had live coverage, and you were just kind of hanging with the lead pack for the longest time. And if I recall correctly, it wasn't until the final 20 miles or so that you're like, okay, guess I'm feeling pretty good. Let's turn it to 100 here.
So the course record year, I took the lead, I think maybe like 40-ish miles in to the race, right? So yeah, but even if you're competing at that kind of level, you know, like really pushing, it's like ultimately it's like run your own race, right? You know, I mean, yes, maybe towards the end, or there's like tactics, or you go, oh, I know that person isn't as good on an uphill or a downhill, and can I use that to my strength or whatever, right? But yeah, no, you've got to run your own race. I had the good fortune I'd run it the year before, and yes, happened to win. But of course, like that first year gave me, like, you know, a bit of course knowledge or confidence of where I felt, oh, I'm proportionally better maybe on a certain section of the course than others, right? Or, you know, hey, I don't need to be, you know, up at the front at the start, right? I mean, it goes without saying it's 100 miles, but I mean, Western States is reasonably, well, it's not totally unique, but I mean, it's certainly not a uniform course, right? So, you know, with the high country, the first sort of like, 40-ish miles or so, it's like, you're not going to like make your race over that section, but you could make some mistakes that come and bite you later on, right? And, you know, Gene, you've got a million times more ultra experience than I do, so I think I can probably offer you very little advice. But the high country early on, and it's going to be interesting this year, like they've got a lot of snow right now, right? And it can surprise people how it is quite technical, because a lot of, you know, the coverage of Western States is, you know, the ridiculous times that Jim Walmsley runs, or, you know, you see some of the trails like sort of past Forest Hill at, you know, at a mile 60 or so, and people, oh, well, this is like, you know, like so smooth and so easy, right? Yeah, I think being prepared for some of the tougher terrain, and certainly when I ran it, you know, like I was more than competent enough, but equally knows, like, if you push a bit too hard there, it can really chew you up for later. So yeah.
I've heard a rumor that they're considering an alternate route this year around the top to avoid the snow.
Yeah, well, so I have not heard that rumor, Jean. I would not be surprised. So the first year, 2011, when I ran it, yeah, it was a snow route, right? Which this is where I am not the expert, because I don't know the trail like in extreme detail. But yeah, they do sometimes. And I think there's two things to bear in mind. If it's not a snow route, that doesn't mean to say there won't be any snow up in the high country, right? So if you, you know, it's going to be dry. No, they might do the regular course because there's not too much snow, but there's still
less
snow, right? Or yes, there's just less, right? Yeah, or you skirt around a little in the early miles, and I think it's, yeah, you know, it's normally the first 15 or so miles, and until I think they've not had to do a snow route for quite a few years, but it used to be not that uncommon, right? So yeah, and then the other thing I guess that might be affected by snow, and again, this may have changed since my years of doing it, both years I did Western States, I went across the river in the raft, right? So across the Green River, so the Rucky Chucky. So I don't know, I mean, obviously there's a dam up there, right? And in recent years, it seems the majority of people, they've had the rope across and they've gone through, but I don't know if it's a higher snow year, whether it's more likely to be rafts over the river, but that's a minor point, right?
As long as I don't have to swim it.
No, you don't. They certainly have plenty of volunteers to make sure that nobody attempts to swim. Yeah, going over there. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so you know, you learned a lot in 2011. You applied it in 2012. You talk about playing to your strengths on the race course, and I do recall a lot of heat training going into 2012 for you. I can't recall it from 2011, but I certainly recall it going into 2012. How much of a factor do you think heat plays in being successful in this race, and certainly being able to play to your strengths later in the race?
Yeah, I mean, the first asterisk, when I set the course record, it was one of the coldest years ever, okay? And there's no doubt, and it was the year that the most finishers ever, like percentage-wise, were under 24 hours, okay? So the first thing is, well, okay, one, you can't change the weather. So there's no point, oh my goodness, it's a super hot year. Well, same for everybody, right? If it's super hot, okay? It will mean average time, like let's say it is a hot year, because and I can't remember which year was called the fire and ice year, right? Because it was one of those winters where they had a lot of snow, but then it actually ended up being really hot on race day, right? So I think right now, obviously, California's getting dumped on snow, and I heard that Alpine Meadows ski resort is open until July 4th this year. So they've certainly got a good base. But just because you may have a snow route, it could still be a hot year. It's just like does the switch flip later on. So now if let's say it's a cooler year, I don't think you throw it out the window and go, I'm going to run a crazy fast time, and I just go for it. But I think it's an acceptable reason to go, oh, maybe I thought I'd be at this point at this stage, I'm a little ahead and that kind of stuff. But I mean, more and more the studies there is, I don't want to say zero disadvantage to heat training. It's a stress on the body for sure. And if some people, you know, they've already got enough on their plate, they might not want to do it. But for me, it's a no-brainer to do heat training for Western States, because if it's a hot year, you'll be very, very glad you did it, right? If it's a cool year, well, there's been shown to be advantages anyway, right? And even a cool year, it's not going to be cold, right?
Mhm.
Well, I shouldn't tempt, we've got global warming, it could be anything, right? But for me, doing heat training, or what I noticed, I was at Western States last year crewing for a friend, and she said, oh, you know, how did you use ice and whatever? I said, I don't really recall we had ice, whereas now it's all, you know, they have X many pounds of ice. So personally, I feel I did sauna training because that's what I had access to, right? Again, Jean, it depends how hot the weather is and, you know, the last few weeks of your training, right? Whether, you know, if someone's lives somewhere super hot, then they may feel they're getting enough exposure outside. But then also managing the heat on the day, right? So, you know, whether that's, you know, wearing the bucket hats or just, there's a lot of places on the Western States course, not just the main river crossing, where there may be a little creek or something. Okay, maybe you decide, I'm just going to get, you know, really wet for 30 seconds, cool myself off, use the ice at the aid stations. And, you know, it can be tempting early on of thinking like, you know, oh, this is using up time. But if you can just keep that stress level down on your body, I think it's well worth it, right? I mean, obviously, Jean, I don't know, I don't want to say it's your goal just to finish, but of course it starts getting hotter the second morning, right? You know, once you're getting into that golden hour, the final hour at the finish, right? So of course it cools a little overnight, which can be nice and give a little reprieve. But then, you know, if you're into that second morning, start noticing, and obviously at that point your body's under a lot of strain from being at mile 90 whatever of 100 miler, then I'd be like, right, start managing the heat again, you know, just to get that little bit of extra help to the finish. So.
Good point.
Well, I do indeed have a goal additional to just finishing. The 70 plus course record is about 28 hours.
Nice.
And, I'm feeling like if I'm in shape that and the conditions aren't extreme, I should have a shot at that.
Yeah, no, perfect. And I love how you say that exactly. If the conditions aren't extreme, right? Because it is a course that can, yeah, it just varies from year to year. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we've heard stories about people recently going out on Western States too hard given the conditions, and no, I wouldn't make that mistake.
No, yeah, pacing is everything. So yeah, who has that 70-year-old course record?
Oh, it's a really old one. It might be Ray Piva.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't tracked that one. So. Hey, yeah, but perfect. I mean, it's always good. I mean, Genji, you've done a million of these races, but having tiered goals, right? Of, you know, that's an extra incentive of when the going gets tough. Okay, you've got that, but can I make that extra time? Which, I mean, I always found that useful, was having these, you know, arbitrary goals of whether it's keep up this pace or get to a certain section before it gets dark or whatever, right? To just, you know, little motivators at certain sections of the course. So yeah.
So I do have a quick question about nutrition. We're getting near the end of our talk here, and this has been awesome. But Ellie, you're a legend for going with chips and Coke. To my recollection, yes, it is true. It is true. You're busted. I know. Coach Ellie, chips and Coke. All right, talk to us about race nutrition. Obviously, that's what worked for you.
Not 100%. Well, I thought Jean had signed a contract where he's only allowed to eat Stoked Oats.
Just Stoked Oats, Stoked granola. Else. We'll have some Stoked Oats pancakes, Stoked Oats oatmeal. No. We're building an oatmeal cannon. So
I think that's very good for preparation in the meals in the weeks before. Anyway, again, this is very generic, right? But nutrition is individual for everybody. Personally, if you can keep it simple, I think it's nice to keep it simple. I often tell the story, and I hope this is not being misquoted, but the year that Magda Boulay won Western States, and obviously she works for a nutrition company, she did entirely liquid calories, okay? So I think one thing to bear in mind at Western States, it's likely to be anything from reasonably warm to hot, okay? That's a stress on the body. It also means you do need fluids. Now, I personally wouldn't want to rely 100% on liquid calories, right? Because, you know, if those don't start going down too well, but you can, I think, rely on it a bit more compared to other races because you are just needing to take in fluids, right? So if calories are in fluids, that can be really nice. Of course, yeah, if it's hot, that's an easy way to get calories in without, I mean, personally, I find like if it gets hot, I don't want like more solid foods or that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, again, it's only one person, but I mostly did energy drink, gels, like some little chews, and yeah, then chips, which it sounds ridiculous, but you know, they're salty, they're crunchy, so even if you're a bit hot, like they go down pretty easily, right? It's something savory, that kind of stuff. But yeah, generally for something like Western States, I'd say you can afford to, and yeah, get a good amount possibly of liquid calories. And then the other thing to bear in mind in Western States is like the aid stations are fantastic, right? So even if you've got your plan and maybe you've got crew gene and okay, this is what I'm going to eat, if it all goes wrong, you can be rest assured there's very likely to be something in aid station. Like the first year I ran Western States, my stomach was not that great. And I remember a volunteer was like, you know, maybe you want a boiled potato or some ginger ale. Now I hadn't brought anything like that, but you know, that was just the ticket. So yeah, yeah.
Well, I've got my strategies that have been worked well in other ultras. I can't see why it'll be any different from Western States. I usually start out, you know, eating whatever the aid station provides that looks good. You know, I let my eyes do the picking. Usually about mile 50 or 60, though, I kind of lose my appetite. And now I've learned to switch to Morton when that happens. And I can get down a lot of calories that way. And it'll be especially easy when I have a crew. You know, it's kind of hard to carry around enough packets or have them in the right places. But and I also get a lot of calories from Coke, you know.
Yeah, no, exactly, perfectly. And that's exactly what I say to everyone is you've done so many of these things that you find what works for you. And you've said precisely the right thing of some people go, oh, it's Western States, so they have to do something special or different. And it's like, no, you should kind of like treat it like any other 100-miler. Like, yes, absorb the atmosphere and the amazingness of this is Western States, absolutely. But otherwise go, ultimately, it's 100 miles. I know what I'm doing. I've done this before, and I'm not going to change it just because it's Western States. Because I do think people make that mistake, right? They think, you know, they've got to do something different or special, and it often goes wrong. So, yeah.
That's a good point. At the end of the
good
day,
advice.
100-miler. Yeah. Well, guys, I think
just another 100.
Just another 100. Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much it. So, Jean, if you've got one last burning question for Ellie, let's get that in. Otherwise, we'll let her get back to her NENAC training group.
Well, I don't know if we're short on time or not, but I was reviewing some of her articles in Ultra Running Magazine, and she was saying about how much fun it is just to go out there and run for fun with friends. And I did that a couple of years ago in 2021. I got 6 friends together, and you know, we did the Zion Traverse, and then ran in Bryce and Goblin Valley and Canyonlands, and it was just wonderful. Every day we got to look forward to a new adventure, and it's just wondering if maybe Ellie had an idea about some neck of the woods that I should be considering for a week-long outing like that.
Very cool.
We were thinking of doing kicking out another one in that area, starting out with a rim to rim to rim.
Wow. Okay. Well, I was okay, of course, to drag you north of the border, right?
Okay.
And,
yeah, sure. Throw something out there.
Well, yeah, Simon and I lived in Banff, you lived in Calgary, I think, at the time, right? So the Canadian Rockies, I couldn't pick together, let's say, you know, one point to point or like large loop or something, but there's some beautiful destinations there. The thing, definitely, if you go to the Canadian Rockies, I'd probably say like July or August to be able to, you know, be pretty sure you can get high. But Simon and I did Rockwall Traverse once, which is like a 54K, like point to point. So yeah, I'd really encourage you, sort of the Alberta BC border. You could do a whole bunch. I don't know, it might be trickier to do, you know, one big loop and have accommodations along the way, but there would be a ton of routes that you could do as like, you know, day trips for a week. So
yeah, mostly day trips we think would work best. I did the rock wall. It was a hiking trip though.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah, that was stunning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's changed a little bit too, Ellie, actually, after the floods. You might have been in and around your departure at that point from the area, but yeah, they closed down a lot of the tributary trails just because the bridges got washed out. So it took a few years to get those back in, but still epic trail. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, Gene, we'll get you in the Canadian Rockies. I like that, Ellie. It's a good answer. Okay, well, hey, thank you so much to you both. It's great to see you again, Gene and Ellie. It's awesome to see you as well. Thanks for making time for us today and giving us some insights from your years of doing this and you know your many years of coaching experience as well. So certainly appreciated, and you know we're creeping ever closer to the Western States race day. It's very exciting. I can certainly feel the energy over here at Stoked Oats starting to build. Everybody's getting pretty pumped. Yeah, we're ready to have a fun little outing with Gene.
Okay, this was great. Nice meeting you finally. Even though we've run 2 races together, I'm quite sure we didn't chat at it.
Yeah, well, I hope I get to meet you officially another time, Gene. No, best of luck. I think, like I said at the start, I think it's super that, I mean, it's so hard to get into Western States, and I know everybody's got their, oh, well, I should get in because of this or whatever. But yeah, the fact that, you know, you're going for records in multiple ways, and you've certainly earned your spot in the ultra community. It's going to be fun to track you on race day.
Well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you both.